Financial services doesn't innovate normally as fast as some of the other industry. I mean, particularly the tech industry. I think there's a huge opportunity with using AI to help consumers, engage them more, help them understand things, help them understand the decisions, help them use the products they bought better, get through all this complicated jargon.
Matt, what unique innovation opportunities are being overlooked in the pensions and wealth space, in your opinion? Hello and welcome to the Heuristic Code podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're joined by Matt Gosden, a strategist and enterprise architect working at the forefront of pensions, wealth, and long-term savings. He advises organizations on how to apply AI and data in practical, responsible ways across highly regulated areas of financial services, from long-term savings to protection products and customer engagement. His current venture explores how AI can help people make better financial decisions by understanding the complex rules and systems that shape their lives. Matt, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, lovely to be on the show. Thanks so much, Alex.
Let's dive into the world of long-term savings and wealth. What does meaningful innovation actually look like in that sector? And especially when you're working within, decades-old infrastructure and deeply regulated environments.
Yeah. So I've been in the industry for a long time, so 25, maybe nearly 30 years now. Well, I started off, my very first job was in tech actually, but I spent most of my time in financial services. So financial services doesn't innovate normally as fast as some of the other industry. I mean, particularly the tech industry innovates so quickly. So it's partly down to regulation, and there is a bit of legacy and stuff as well. Maybe we can talk a bit more about that in a minute. But I think if you spoke to most of the business leaders, meaningful innovation usually comes in the form of them thinking a lot about how do you help improve the customer experience, particularly in things like savings and pensions, because it's been pretty lousy for a long time. Most people are not very engaged by what their insurers or the banks are now a lot better with their sort of the challenger banks, but still banking still can be a bit sleepy at times, and certainly pensions and so on is quite sleepy too. So I think meaningful innovation around helping customers understand and use their products is very important, and obviously that's what we're doing. So I'm a bit biased on that. But there's also innovation. Again, if you talk to the tech people, we often have some innovation discussions around things like, platforms or replatforming and things like that as well, which is slightly different. That's about how do you maybe deal with your legacy. But for me, I think a lot of it really is about the customer experience. And the third and final bracket is probably more on the commercial type levers. So different industries are different. So if you take maybe some of the insurance side, you're innovating around how we do pricing, to try and get ahead of the competition, or how we do some sort of commercial levers for customers like retention, cross-sell and stuff. And again, using tech for that, and how do you plug that out and engage it? That's another area where I think innovation can be quite meaningful also to the bottom line and so on as well. I mean, those are three categories, the ones that I sort of most interested in.
So the infrastructure is quite old, right? And my take into why it's old because it works. And there is not so much interest into changing that because it's doing what it's designed to do. So suddenly in the world of AI, we are carrying this heavy technical debt from legacy systems that are still operational, they still work, but at the same time, as you said, it's driven by user experience and business opportunities to innovate. So how do you, navigate this? How do you update these core systems without disrupting the core trust and compliance and continuity of a business?
I mean, I could talk about some of the, particularly the insurance-y side of things and pension side of it, a bit less on the banking side. But yeah, some of these core systems are, they need really high resilience and, big security risks, and there's privacy risks and so on. So they are quite heavy infrastructure that, you don't want to break as well. So that naturally means people are cautious. And then you have regulation on top of that, and fines if you get it wrong, and reputational damage if you get it wrong. And so it's not a surprise that companies are quite risk averse about making changes. I think we all ended up with quite a lot of fragmentation over the decades. As a lot of these financial services firms were very early at taking on technology. The first insurance company I worked on, we did a lot of stuff with the mainframe still, in terms of doing valuations and stuff and writing in SaaS and right, and submitting these jobs to the servers and stuff, and sort of on green screen type stuff. And that was I guess that was the very late 90s and stuff. We were still using all that sort of stuff because it sort of worked and worked at scale, and it had been around for a long time, but it was very fragmented in that each company sort of set up their own. So you end up with a big fragmentation of it. And what we haven't really seen, we have in some areas, but we haven't really seen good platforms to take over. There are some, like in the wealth space, there are a few companies that will provide like fund platforms and things like that. But we haven't seen one hugely dominant player in most of the areas that's just sort of swept up the whole infrastructure piece, really. Maybe that's a business model for someone, but it's because of that, you've still got this fragmentation, I think. So that's one of the challenges really with it, is that it's dealing with the old legacy. But it's not all bad, because you can put layers around it. You can put service layers around it. You can expose what your core record keeping system does to a more modern API, so that you could actually do integration. So you can actually still do stuff, but you probably can't do the sort of the clever, really super dynamic, super fast stuff all the time. But you can certainly do a lot more than nothing, which is unfortunately what some of what's actually, things have been slow. Innovation's been quite slow in this space.
So you mentioned like hypothetical, provider that could, overtake the industry. I'm quite surprised that there is none in the market at the moment. It's quite interesting. But at the same time, like you said, it's because of the fragmentation. So I imagine, I'm not an expert in the industry by any means, but I imagine there are still several key players in the market, right, of like large scale operations. Based on your experience, so these players, what are the biggest architectural challenges they're facing? Is this related to data unification, because we're trying to leverage AI, and AI relies heavily on the state of data in the organization, or it's more about user experience, as it's also plays a large part in having efficient business running, or something else?
So, I mean, there are some players that do some. I'm not saying it's that there aren't. There are some good players and stuff as well, but it's not like there seems to be one super dominant player just does the infrastructure play. A bit like your AWS and your Azure, that's just
Right.
sort of quite dominant, of Google, obviously Google Cloud as well coming along too. So there are, and in different sectors there are solutions that do platforms for them, and there's some big names too. So just to wrap up, like Salesforce is in it, quite a lot of the big insurers I know well, but the usage is quite limited in many cases. So integration is a problem. So I think getting these systems in and integrate is a problem. It's very expensive, it seems to be, to use them. And then if you don't really use the systems properly, you don't really commit to it, you often don't get the benefit from it, that sort of thing. So that's one of the, just sort of wrapping up on the previous point, that's really where I think quite a lot of the issue is, getting the integration. And then when it comes to things like AI, as you asked, so integrating in on things like that, there's a lot of talk about data as being a problem. So again, if you go around a lot of the people in tech management and so on, you'll hear a lot of things about our data's a mess, and we need to do more stuff, we need to modernize it and so on. And it's definitely true that the data isn't anywhere near as neat and tidy as, again, some of the tech, or expansive as some of the tech firms and so on. But I think you can already still do some stuff in a sort of scrappy way. So a number of firms have sort of tried to focus on sort of data replatforming, data tidy up programs. And I don't know, I mean, I might be wrong, but I feel that sometimes those programs don't necessarily achieve a lot, as opposed to taking it the other way around, which is more my natural style anyway, which is start from a use case and do something a bit scrappy with what you've got, because you can usually get something working from what you've got. And then you've got, something, a proof point that works, and then start to build, the tidy data backend and stuff. And that really applies to use of AI as well then. So if you're doing AI models for pricing, or machine learning models for that, again, I probably wouldn't set up a great big data infrastructure of all your data so you can do whatever you want. I would probably start with a few use cases and say, well, what do we actually need? What can we get away with? How can we test this? We've got the data over there, and we'll muck around with it. We'll tidy it up for now. And then when this looks like this is working, we can work out how to productionize it, and maybe work out what type of system and data architecture you need. So, but I think you'll often hear the other argument, which people saying this, we need to probably do the data tidy up first before we start doing the other things. I just don't think that's a I don't think that's a way to move very quickly, and I think is often a way to waste quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and everybody wants to move quickly with AI. It's a catch-up game.
Yeah, it's moving so fast.
Talking about AI,
Yeah.
so you've written about responsible rollout of AI in
Yeah.
financial services. Where do you think Gen AI can make the biggest impact in the pensions and wealth space?
Yeah, so well, I guess I'm talking my own book about here as well, but but particularly focused on customers. So I think where we're seeing most of the initiatives underway at the moment, most of which hasn't really been talked about much, is internal facing use cases with generative AI. So, which a lot of it's about helping, particularly the knowledge workers in the business, become more efficient, effective. So, you've got loaded data and documents all over the organization. Can we use search, basically, sort of AI search, to help us surface that and help me understand what's going on, become more efficient, and things like, meeting, documentation tools and all of that sort of stuff. So where you put a human in the loop, it's internal facing. So the human's still got to decide what the right thing is, and it's like having an assistant, really. So that's where I think we've got most of the use cases so far, and there is definitely value in that. And I think generally it's working really quite well in some firms from what I can see. And what we're particularly focused on, I think, where there's a much bigger opportunity is on the customer facing side of things. So customers are out there, quite a lot of them now, using ChatGPT, Gemini, things like that, and saying, well, this is really good. And actually, probably a lot of them, in fact, there's various different surveys out there with different numbers, but a lot of them are asking financial services questions on things like, what should I do with this and what can I do that? Here's my annual statement. What should I do? And getting responses from them, which are very engaging and very, very well argued, and more often than not, probably right. So, I mean, we've done quite a few studies on this. They're probably right. The latest models are quite good, but they're probably right, though, only still maybe 60, 70% of the time on the complicated stuff, 80, 90% on the simpler stuff. So the rest of the time, people are getting it wrong. It's, the machine's getting it wrong and they don't know. And the customer doesn't really care because they don't know, and they're getting an engaging thing, and it's easy and it's free. So I think this is a huge opportunity or imperative, really, for the industry to say, well, people are out there using these other tools and, working out what decisions they want to make, but they will be making the wrong decisions under certain circumstances. And I think it's a big opportunity for the industry to sort of bring sort of trust into that and how they're going to deal with that. So I think there's a huge opportunity with using AI to help consumers, engage them more, help them understand things, help them understand the decisions, help them use the products they bought better, get through all this complicated jargon, maybe even communicating with their company through their chat, and all this sort of stuff asynchronously. So I think there's a great opportunity there, and we can already see that happening in the agent space, the generalist agent space. The question is, can the industry get comfortable enough that with the technology, because it will never be 100% right when you're using such open language and stuff like that, but it's still already a lot more accurate than most humans that are answering these questions. So it's already better than, in many ways, the status quo, but they've still got to get comfortable with it so they can get it in the hands of customers. And so that's sort of where we are at the moment, is at various stages, sort of internal testing, with small groups and, the little groups that are quite protected and stuff like that. And then there's lots of these risk committees to get through and all that sort of stuff as well. So it's a big opportunity there, but there's a big barrier to get over for these financial services firms. And that goes to banks, insurers, pension funds and stuff as well.
Is this a question of trust into the technology or
So there is a bit of that, yeah. So there's quite a lot of pieces going into it, and we'd like lots going through this process in the startup for the last sort of, I guess, 2.5 years we've been on this particular bit of the journey, and in that time, that there was a lot of hype about 2 years ago, and everyone wanted to start projects to do things and stuff like that, and then some people started realizing, oh, this is actually a bit flaky sometimes, technology. So there is a trust question around the core technology itself. Like, is someone's data going to be used for training? We don't want that. There's a privacy issue. There's a security issue around, new forms of essentially sort of hacking that you can do with these things, and prompt injection attacks and so on. And again, there's solutions actually to a lot of these. In fact, pretty much all of these things have got solutions now. And there's a whole group in organizations, particularly coming out the tech, risk and legal side, that are being very focused on that side of things. So that's, in a way, taking tech security and applying it to AI systems, like, again, a conversational system, like the sort of thing we do. But there's a whole other side which is new, which is what I call accuracy, which is that when a thing responds to a user, there is a possibility it's not right. Okay, and we do lots of stuff with guardrails and lots of things like that, and checks, and loads of things to get that accuracy rate way up, way more than the sort of the generalist models. But there's still a possibility, and there's still a corner you could push it into and get a result that you maybe didn't quite like. So there's a whole accuracy side of things that we didn't have within traditional technology, where you were building a form in an app or something like that. It's very sort of locked down. The fields have got various input forms, and it only works one way. It's quite rigid, and you could really pin it down. So accuracy, you would do some tests to make sure the actual calculations work correctly, but the actual app itself, and again, you do some tests, but you could be pretty comfortable that it was basically right, and if it wasn't right, you get a bug fixed, and you could do that. When you do it in language, there's all this accuracy stuff about where it's not accurate too. So on the happy path, it's likely to be pretty good anyway, because you built it for that. But if a customer goes into this weird corner over here, these certain circumstances, maybe it goes off piste. So there's a whole risk management side about accuracy. How do you measure it? How do we even find them? When they happen in production, how do we know that something's maybe not quite optimal with that conversation? And so we can either get it reviewed or close the loop. There's a whole risk management side of it that is so important, I think, to these financial services firms. So we've been working quite a lot on thinking that through, and how does that work? And because that's the bit, I think, with generative AI that's new for anything that's going to be customer facing, really.
So your focus right now is on the customer facing solutions, right?
Yeah.
So as I picture it, as a user of the system, I can ask it to look at different solutions available in the market in terms of my pension or long-term investment, analyze what's happening, and then come back and advise something. So it's more like an advisor, right? So it's advising direction, but it also keeps the memory of what kind of decisions been happening with me, particularly in the past, and leveraging other contextual data that's available from other providers. Did I get it right? Or
mostly, yeah. So exactly. So so helping consumers essentially use this. Again, let's take the pensions example. That's where we've been doing most stuff. So helping users use the product. So there's a bunch of stuff where it's just like questions around your pension stuff. So very ChatGPT-like style of things. You're asking questions, except you're plugged into the actual data that they have, and actually a lot of security and quality around the knowledge and the knowledge base. Because again, a lot of the stuff that's out on the internet is wrong, and therefore some of these answers that the machines out of the box create are wrong, and you don't necessarily know they're wrong and stuff as well. So so getting high quality, that's the sort of sometimes called question answering type mode. That one mode. But where things move away a bit is when you're on sort of journeys where someone is trying to maybe do something. So you mentioned advice. So we don't get into the actual formal advice space particularly. We can come back to that as a discussion topic later as to why. But formal advice is quite difficult to do. It's in that there's a lot of pieces to it, although it's quite valuable to the user and stuff as well. We focus more on what we call guidance. So for example, if we take the UK, there's about nearly 1 million people a year tap into their pension pot for the first time. And a lot of them, far more than half of them, take their whole pension pot in one go. And quite a lot of them do that at quite an early age, and maybe paying unnecessary tax. So, it gets taxed as income if you do it, and you may be earning that year. It might be better to take it next year when you're not earning, or take it half and half or whatever. And also people who are maybe on lower incomes, people on things like what's called universal credit, which means tested benefits in the UK, might be 15-20% of people on that. It could actually blow up your benefits without knowing it. So the idea being, you say, in the moment when someone says, look, I've got $5,000 in my pension pot, I just want to take it. You're being able to insert a journey into the process at that moment that's engaging, that says, well, that's fine. Yeah, I can sort of give you that money, but do you understand the implications of what you're doing? And we can go through a few questions and help you understand that and so on in a more of a guidance way, without actually giving advice you should or shouldn't do that, but helping someone understand the implications of what they're trying to do. I think that's important, and that's what the big providers, and not the small providers, but it's the big providers we're typically talking to, I think, need and want as well. They want to help their customers more. They want to help their customers make the right decisions. It's often commercially the right thing for them to do. The regulator wants them to do it. And today consumers are a bit left on their own. It's like, there's a website here, or there's a third-party service. You can try and get an appointment over here. It might take you 2 weeks to get an appointment. So that's where we're trying to focus, is on that guidance piece for like the 90% of the people, as opposed to like the 10% who get advice. But yeah, it's exactly that sort of thing. And you can imagine lots of different journeys. And again, if you're a company, say a bank or an insurer or something with this, you want it to be able to integrate with your systems, so you can look up your policy record, and if you want to take money out, and also maybe even sort of propose the transaction to be done, and then maybe it sits over for a human to check and confirm beforehand or whatever. So you want to design a process around that as well. So that's what will be going on in the background.
So I work with AI pretty much every day. Like we develop solutions for AI. I use AI personally, and it changes so fast. You have to, every day you catch up with something new model, new mode, deep research. Oh, this model released this and that. So it's really fast-paced environment, and feels like everybody's playing catch-up game. But at the same time, you're dealing with slow-moving, very regulated industry and business with lots of legacy. And at the same time, because the consumers of this industry are also playing with this AI solutions on a daily basis, they have quite high expectations. So the question is, how do you create a roadmap? How do you deal with this, two big parts of this, but that are completely moving in a different speeds? How do you manage that? How do you create a roadmap for this?
Well, yeah, the keeping up is difficult, I have to say. I mean, and we're focused only on this. So just to give you an example, I say with this particular venture, we've been at this about 2.5 years, I think now, nearly. And we are in the process of rebuilding our tech stack for the 4th time in that time, because we've created legacy 3 times in 2.5 years. So it's just, that's the rate of pace of change. And we've needed to do that to avoid ourselves getting stuck into our own sort of legacy. That's very, very quick. And that means you need to keep investing, and it's difficult, but on the other hand, you then get down better capabilities. So it is quite hard to keep up. And it's actually really hard to keep up with these really large AI labs that have essentially unlimited money and fantastic talent. And they're producing great products, let's be honest. I mean, all of the labs are doing great, but, I use a lot of the open AI stuff just because I like the way it works, the product. And that team delivers lots of great stuff, as well. And they're not hamstrung by some regulations or stuff like that. And they're doing something much broader. So so you just keeping up with what's going on is actually a challenge in itself, ignoring the point about the industry being slow.
Yeah.
And then if we look at the industries being slow, I mean, the industry's slow because, they're just naturally slow anyway. They've never been fast at buying software. So if you go into any enterprise SaaS salespeople, they'll probably tell you it takes 18 months or more to sell enterprise software in anyway. And so in my experience, it's not particularly different timeline. It's quite similar to that. And so it's sort of similar to how software worked. But I think the big thing we're still missing is there's a huge herd mentality in a lot of industries, but particularly in this industry. No one really wants to go first. Maybe they do want to be innovative or not. Well, not. But once someone is live with something and others point to it, the herd all starts to move together. And there's a whole mechanism around how that works with just the way risk aversion works in that industry, the way it works with regulation. And then all of the suppliers, particularly the way the consultants work with it and stuff as well, they start pointing to that. So you end up with this, nothing happens, something good happens, and then everyone wants to do it. So you end up with this. So my strategy is about let's get someone with something live, something good. That's what needs to happen. That's the catalyst. And then you end up with lots of things happening. I think that's the way around it, is to just, to try and get something out there, even on a narrow beta or whatever, in whatever form. I think that's still useful to get that out there. And I would also say the thing that I always knew, but I'm always surprised at every time, I learn again every single time, is it's so useful to get things in the hands of customers, which we've done a number of times now. And you just learn so much that you didn't expect. When you actually put things in the hands of customers, and you could always just say, "Oh, I'll make it better and better before in the hands of customers." I mean, we did something recently. It was a very small group, and we had in that group, it was sort of guided conversation, quite a long conversation around some of these guidance tasks. And in the end, we had 114 long conversations with the machine, basically, which are very they ended up being quite structured. Only 114. And from that, we got a huge amount of insight around what customers did and didn't like, and where they were getting frustrated, and where they were, again, because it's in conversation. So you can get a huge amount of insight, particularly when you're doing things with Gen AI, because you've got a lot more information there. You can do a lot. So we've got a long list of to-dos just from that quite small test. And those to-dos weren't exactly the same as what we thought we had to do as well. So so we do need to get things in the hands of customers. So I think one thing the industry needs to get a bit better at is trialing things. And there are some mechanisms for it. So again, in the UK, the regulator, the FCA, has a sandbox you can use, and they've got this new AI lab coming, and they're trying to sort of encourage the industry to sort of try things out. And I think that's very important because of so in a sort of a safe environment, and then be able to show how that works. That sort of catalyzes action and things like that. But it's slow. It's difficult to get companies to commit, but that's normal. But then on the other side, it's very sticky from a supplier's point of view. It's a very sticky business.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I think in financial services in general, that's how the business is done. It's slow, but yes, sticky, and there's lots of money in this industry just to work with.
Yeah.
Matt, what unique innovation opportunities are being overlooked in the pensions and wealth space, in your opinion?
So I've talked a bit about some of the customer-facing stuff, and I just underline that again because I think there's a lot that consumers can benefit from by being able to, at the time of their choosing, just engage with their pension, their insurance product, their long-term savings, or whatever. And a lot of people don't do it today because it's clunky, the user experience bad, or they just don't understand, or they feel stupid. They're made to feel stupid by they don't understand the jargon and so on. So being able to do things in a way that enables you to ask questions and understand things, and then be put in a simple way, and making it easy through use of AI to help do that, I think is a huge opportunity. And I think that we're already seeing that there's a huge demand for that, because again, various surveys and stuff out there saying that people are already using ChatGPT and equivalents for lots of financial tasks as well. So that's a huge innovation point, how you do that. And the industry just needs to start getting some stuff out. I think also on the other end, I think there is a bit of innovation around maybe the sort of the technology backbone as such. As I mentioned to you before, it strikes me that there isn't really a sort of a standard. So I love open source in the tech space. We use a lot of that, and it's sort of these big, well-supported sort of platforms that, well, they're essentially free for us to use. Okay, so that's different. But, and people build stuff on top of that. We don't have those backbones so much. There are a few players who build like a platform, but then at the moment it's more in a product space and not really in the utility space. There's a lot of vendor capture going on, and usually there's a lot of custom build on top of it and custom design. So therefore, it's really expensive and sort of semi-custom tech that these firms end up having. So we need something stronger there, I think, because ultimately, under the hood, most of these products are really almost the same. It's about taking some payments, putting them in a pot. There is the regulatory tax wrapper bit. So you've got a regulatory piece, and you've got a technology piece, and then you've got an investment piece. The investment piece is already the custody space, which is quite well commoditized. So I think there's something around that. I think to make the industry really innovate, and it might require more consolidation. I think that would be getting a sort of a clearer backbone would really help as well.
I'd like to finish this discussion by looking at the industry in general and how industry of pensions and long-term investments is actually designed. So if you had a blank sheet of paper to redesign how this industry works, where would you start and what would you leave behind?
So the underlying products these days are quite simple. It's basically a pot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Money, you do something, your employer helps you set it up typically. Money goes in a pot, and it's different in different countries slightly, but broadly speaking. And then at retirement, you have some options about how to take it out. And then there's some tax, and there's a bunch of rules and regs around and stuff like that. But it's not fundamentally that complicated. I mean, it's some complexity there, but there's also not a huge difference between different providers. There's not a lot of product differentiation and stuff like that. So I think, again, I said, I think one thing is like, standardizing that a bit more. But I could see a world where, most consumers just don't really want to deal with it. They just sort of want it there. I can see a world with AI and some of the agentic stuff coming on where maybe um, you just have a machine that the machine just does it for you. A bit like when you have a financial advisor today, they'll do quite a bit. They'll come back to you for the key decisions and stuff like that. And but they'll be keeping an eye on your financial situation, and they should be sort of updating things and moving your assets around as needed or whatever. So I could see this sort of, I've got an agent doing it for me type of thing approach, and it doesn't have to be advice expensive in my view. It wouldn't make sense if it was. And I could see that being a really interesting innovation. I think a lot of people would like, which is like, it's going to sort it for me. It's going to ask me some questions, but it's going to be off talking to my provider and getting my pension pot. And if there's any opportunity to do something, it'll be nudging me. So, but working for me as opposed to being, from said insurer or bank. So I think there's a potential interesting innovation there, or it might be that the bank or the insurer provides that as a tool. So I think just making it sort of easy and helping people get better outcomes essentially by sort of having it sort of actively managed by essentially an expert, which could be a machine expert. Now that's really difficult to do with advice at the moment because the way the advice regime is set up in different countries, again, it's quite different. But but I think that's still quite an interesting innovation and something I would like to. Well, I'd love to build it, but you've got challenges over how you distribute it and how do you get into people's hands and all that sort of stuff as well.
I think we've came across the concepts a few times already in the previous episodes that we're slowly moving into the world where the infrastructure is built for the agents.
Yeah.
So I can totally envision the world that you described, and also, like I will have an agent who will be helping me with my day-to-day finances and reaching my financial goals, and maybe doing some payments. We talked about payments in our previous episodes and how boring it is, to make decisions what card to use at the cashier. Oh, should I use this card? Would it give me, this discount or cashback or points, whatever, So I think if you think about it on overall, like high level scale, that's where we're getting with this. It's like a bunch of AI agents. Maybe they will end up being powered by, I don't know, a dozen of different providers, but I think that's where we're getting to. And so the challenge is, particularly in this industry that we're talking about, in my opinion, is to modernize the infrastructure so that is API first and agent friendly to interact with, not like it is designed right now to be operated by humans through terminals, through another layers of the systems. So I think those are like the challenges we're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree. Those aren't actually that difficult challenges, though, in a way, because making sort of an agent-friendly API layer is not actually that difficult. In that it comes back with responses that are a bit richer. Like, let's give an example of in my space, like a retirement projection calculator type of thing. Typically those API calls will be like, you need to give these 20 inputs and you give it in a data lump and you get back like one number or maybe a couple of numbers. That works really well though. It's horrible for humans, which is why humans use a UI that makes it look nice and stuff.
Yeah.
The agent, if an agent's doing it, an agent can actually use that and the models can use it, but it's not optimal. What you actually want is you want it to, not so much the input's not so bad, but the output, what comes back to enable you to go deeper, like, what's actually going on in the numbers. And, if I give just part of the numbers, can I come up with rich errors and stuff like that? Now, that isn't actually that difficult to build. We built a couple of those already. And that is, I think, then how you create, let's call them services that an agent can use that that it's it's engaging and informative for the agent to use, so it's going to do a better job to its end user as well. So I absolutely agree with you. I think creating these sort of services that are agent friendly is going to be so important, and that is easier for these big companies than creating their own agent that does everything to high quality and stuff as well. And in reality, they're probably going to have to do a bit of both. If they create their own agent, they need to have these internal services anyway.
Well, yeah, I'd like to wrap this up and thank you for the time. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. Thanks a lot, Matt.
No, thanks very much for inviting me along. It's been great.
And for the listeners, as usual, thanks for listening to the end. Don't forget to hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and if you're listening to any podcast platform, don't forget to leave a positive review, and see you in the next episodes. Bye-bye.